Okay, today I thought we'd talk about, look inside, play with, repair, whatever. This is the Tin Tom's Toys, TTT, from around 2003, I think was the end of the run. Radar robot reproduction. On the original radar robot, of course, was from the 1950s. This was a reproduction made by TTT in China, as I just stated. And they all had some problems. I'm going to go over some of the most common problems. Of all the ones that I saw back in the day, and that was over 20 years ago now, the ones that worked, would usually have a damaged antenna. The joint between this and this part of the antenna, as you can see, just that thin little metal piece there. Well, it would either break at the top here, or was always coming undone there. Point is, normally the radar dish was broken and hanging by a wire. It was just kind of a fragile little design there. The other common problem with them, and I guess we'll go into the insides of this one so you can see it, is there's a gear binding problem in the design. We're going to get into that, I think, but we shouldn't jump ahead to that right away. Here's one that's all together that was sent in to me because it wasn't running. And there's two D-cell batteries inside this remote box. And you would think that both buttons would operate it, but for whatever reason TTT just made one of the buttons operate it. So you have your walking. Here, let's get this where you can see the light eyes, flashing antenna, walking action. And as you can hear, a lot of gear noise, which is one of the problems. Now, if you need to get in to repair one of these, replace lights, unstick the gears, whatever, you pretty much have to take it completely apart. And you're going to need to probably start up here in the head. You can see these little tabs that hold these ear muffs on. Carefully straighten those out. Move the ear muff out. Then this metal piece here, which looks like that, sticks in through a hole in this face shield into the head. So, and this is really stiff, so you're probably going to need some pliers to pull and pop that out. Now you do the same thing on both sides. You know, get the ear muff off on both sides, get this part off. Once you have that off, then this whole face shield piece can be lifted off. It has a pin area there, so you just pry the edge up and it'll pop off and come out. Now behind the mouth opening, they have a small piece of gel, which you don't want to lose. It just sits in there loose like that, so it looks like this from the front, and that can drop out and you can lose it if you're not careful and watching for it. Okay, so once you get the head stuff off, the next piece you're going to want to remove is this piece of chrome trim on the front, and you can see you've got two tabs right there and two tabs right there. Carefully straighten those tabs, then you can pry that piece up and out of the way. Now these are the two main tabs from the gearbox, which are these tabs right here. So you have to straighten those out. And now let's move around to the back side, now that we have the front pretty much prepped. In order to get into this thing, you're going to need to remove this backpack that holds the antenna. And you can see right there, there's a little piece of metal that goes in and crimps in around. You're going to need to get in and bend that out, and then you can tip this whole thing away. So once you bend that tab out of the way, you can tip this whole piece back, and you'll see that there's two prongs on this side. So tip it back out of the way. And once you have it out of the way, you then can get, which is going to be kind of hard to see, but right down there, there are 2 tabs and the little joining piece of metal, and on right up here in the back of the head, same thing, the 2 tabs and the little tab ring. Remove those. Once you have all of that stuff off, you can then start springing the body free. Nothing would be holding the body on at this point except for where it pokes through, where that would poke through, you know, for example, like that, front and back. So you just have to spread it out enough to where you can pop that out of the way. Okay. Now you're inside the toy, more or less. And if you're going to replace the bulbs, then of course that's kind of self-evident. What I'm going to try to show you now is the main mechanical problem. And what I'm straightening is these metal tabs right here, so that we can lift the motor out of the way. Okay. There we go. So the motor comes out and it stays in this half of the shell. So one of the problems with this whole toy is with this large brass pinion gear. It goes down. I'm going to get a screwdriver so my finger doesn't take up, or something to point with. When the motor's in place down there, it runs this crown gear right here. And this crown gear is pressed onto this axle shaft, so that when the gear turns, the shaft turns. This little gear right here is pressed onto the axle shaft, so when the crown gear turns from the motor, then that gear can drive the next gear down below, and the next gear down below comes back up and drives this gear, which is floating on the shaft. And then this gear drives the bottom gear down here, which runs the leg cranks and also the flashing wiper for the light on the back. What do I want to say? The real problem here comes in the distance between this flat gear, the one that's floating on the shaft, and the crown gear. And most of the toys are so close together that when this motor is in place in there, this gear actually is rubbing on this flat one and is tight against the crown gear, which causes the toy to jam up. And there's not a whole lot you can do about it. The shaft itself has crimps there and there to I guess what I'm trying to say is, so you can't move it a whole lot. So this, even if you did move the shaft, that crimp is stopping this flat gear from moving further away, from rubbing on the pinion gear on the motor. So it was just a little bit too tight. It was just a little bit off on the design. If they'd put in an extra 0.5 millimeter, let's see if we can get that way so you can kind of see this as it's going together. Kind of see that crown gear? Alright. I'm going to slide this motor down in there. And then see if there's any way on earth that you can kind of see down in there. Problem is getting the light and the lens in there at the same time. Let's try looking from this side. Not real easy. Got that in there. I'm going to give these tabs a twist to hold the motor in place, like so. Let's see if we can get this one to run. It's a lot for me to try to hold and stay in camera, but we're going to try. Let's see if I can put that on there without shorting out. And I've got a battery pack down here. Alright. That is running. And it actually doesn't sound too bad for this design. When I initially bought this is one from my junk parts room. It was jammed and wouldn't run, which is very standard, very normal for this toy. This one I'd had a part to unjam that motor, and it was running quite silently initially, but as we can all hear, there's quite a bit of motor noise. I guess is to be expected in this type of a toy. If you want to see some of this kind of go together, you've got you would go in there and you could put tab in the back, and then you would bring this around to the front. Like that. And then, of course, this goes all the way around to the back side, and you just kind of have to keep it out of the way for the time being. And then you would start with the other side, like that. There we go. So you can see I'm starting to get it together. And if you're wondering more on that back thing, you'd start with these tabs, poke them in, rock this side in like that, and then you would bend that little piece in to hold that back in place. And the whole assembly just kind of keeps going like that. You've got the face shield, and like I said, there's some alignment pins here and a big hole there. So you put that on like that, and then you do the same thing for this side. So now you've kind of got your face, but you have to remember to put that red gel in there before you do what I just did, because you're not going to get the gel in there afterwards. And you can see that there's a hole in this silver part, and then there's a hole in the head, and when it comes time to put the antenna on, you have to try to hit both those holes. It's not easy. It's not worth doing, since I don't really have any plans on putting this one back together. Okay, there's that side. You can see there's a dipple place for the spring to go. You can see by the way it's crooked and how stiff this metal is, you got to have pliers, because you're going to have to bring that, twist it around, find that hole, jam it in there. Don't have the earmuffs. They must have been needed for some other toy repair. I notice this one also doesn't have its remote. So my guess is this was bought as a non-working unit, and I must have done some repairs for somebody who was either missing earmuffs on their original or needed the remote for an original. Couldn't tell you. I can't remember 20 years back why I acquired something. But there you have it. There's your inside view of the Tin Tom Toys remake of the Radar robot. And hope you enjoyed.